Yeah, Oh, so you're right about the Modesto B. We don't have it anymore. They canceled the program. They didn't say anything. And then the person I was working with is gone. So our email doesn't even work anymore. They went through a bankruptcy. The Modesto B, Fresno B, Sacramento B. It's under a company called McClatchy. And newspapers haven't been doing too well lately. Yeah. And it's called a paywall. And they're trying to make sure that people chip in something. But they blew it. They blew it early on. They could have been, newspapers could have been Facebook, because newspapers are what people turn to for news. But they got so excited about the internet, they didn't think ahead. So they're basically giving away everything for free. And then once you give it away for free, nobody wants to pay for it. And they were relying on their ability to sell ads, which that's smart. That's what Google does. But they didn't do it in a way that advertisers wanted to do it. They were still charging big bucks. And advertisers said, hey, I'll just go on Google. When they search for a Patterson article, my ad will pop up there before they even see your article. And it'll cost me 2 cents. And you want to charge me $1,000. Good. That's what the newspapers say. Good question. So Facebook and people reporting and things like that. And actually, TV news. So a lot of TV news has picked up the slack, and they do articles locally. But like we don't have a TV station here, so it's up to the Sacramento station and other ones. But that's the argument the newspapers make. Oh, we'd have to be around, except if you can't make money, how are you going to be around? And then I don't know if you followed it, but the Modesto B had two different editors, and they both had articles about how great they are. And if you got to tell everybody how great you are, you got problems. And then they tried to do fundraising and try to do it that way. And some people are saying maybe they should be nonprofits and try it that way. But I don't know.
Have you heard of Payroll?
Yeah.
Is that a good thing to
I used it for my mom's house because she needed it, or she was curious about what's going on. So we tried it. It's good. It does things. It's like everything. Some things are good, and then some people want to sell you this product where it's a multi-level marketing thing, and they're basically doing ads and spam. Yeah. Now they have at different levels. There's a free level, and then there's a paid level, and that's another option.
I've been using which you have to be at your house and have access to it, and you have neighbors let you know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, my sister worked for the Bee, so my mom always kept the subscription, but she liked the paper, physical newspaper. And when they would miss her house, she'd call them up and they'd say, oh, well, you can read it online. And she'd tell them if I wanted to read it online, I would go online. I like the paper. And then they say, okay, we'll extend your subscription by one. But then she'd never get that paper. And it was a call center and a lot of bad customer service. So then it got thinner and thinner. Now it's like more of a newsletter than a newspaper. So that's what happens.
Oh, y tú qué te gusta? Los baños, sí, no. Oh, no puedo ir de viaje, no, que y quiero salir que tienes algo, pero me dicen que es muy tarde, solo si le dejas comida. Tengo que separar tus gatos de los demás. Pues puedes hablar como ascensor en mi cuarto. Cuando veníamos aquí las solas los dos,
All right, so when you start up QuickBooks today, we're going to work with Payroll. So when you launch it, you'll see the whole payroll section here just by clicking on Payroll in the navigator on the left-hand side. And you'll see there's two types of people that can work for you. There's employees and contractors. Employees are basically people who work for you. You tell them what to do. You pay their salary, but you also have to do withholding and deductions. Contractors are people who do work for you, usually temporary work. They'll come in and do like install some cables for your computers or something. So you pay them differently. You can also pay them as a vendor. So it just kind of depends on really what you're comfortable with, because they can just be vendors. And you'll see, remember vendors eligible for 1099, there was a little box for that. So you can just do it that way. The employees, however, you're basically responsible for, and then you have to pay as an employer for those employees, including taxes and certain other things like workers' comp insurance. So QuickBooks will help you set that up. The hiring employees is the most expensive and risky thing any company can do, because they do cost a lot of money, and it's more than people think. People get their check and they think, oh, I'm only, costing them $500 a week, but not really. You'll see it's more than that. So first thing when things start to go bad is they start doing layoffs. And you hear now, I think Bank of America said they're going to lay off 1,500 people, because that's the easiest way to cut the budget, is to cut people out. And you'd think, well, if you don't have the people, how are they going to do the work for you? But they figure out a way. They make the people who are behind do extra work or things like that, because they need to cut their budgets. So it's, unfortunately, we'll probably hear more of that going on before things pick up again. So when I go to the payroll, it talks about paying and managing your team. So the way this works is, you'll see these are the different options here that you can sign up for and start. With QuickBooks, we have 30 days to use their system. Okay. Usually they charge, like right now, it's set at $75 a month. If you turn off and on these squares by clicking on them, like if I want to add tax penalty protection, automatically run the payroll for me, human resource support, you'll see this number goes up and up and up. So this is what they charge you per month. This is the elite with everything turned on. On the other hand, since you have me, we don't need all this. And we're only going to do just the payroll. So I'm going to turn all these off and watch it go down. Everything except pay workers and file payroll taxes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So we just want to leave this one on. So these others are additional services. Time tracking over here is one that you'll use if you have employees that you're going to turn around and charge their time to a client. to a customer. So again, like attorneys, if somebody's going to work on their case, I need you to do research, or I need you to type this up. Then they turn around and say, all right, I worked 15 minutes on Dan's case. So then I can just put it in here in the computer, turn on the stopwatch. When I'm done, turn it off, and it'll automatically bill Dan for the employee's time. So you can set that up. We're not going to use that. We're just going to be retail, but that's what that's for. Human resources support is for questions about laws and things and how to handle things. And you could use your QuickBooks as support to do that. And that's helpful if you're new, or if you just don't want to mess with it. A lot of employers, if they're sole proprietors, it's just them, they don't want to mess with all that human resources. They want to do the job. They want to sell stuff. They don't want to deal with human resources. So you can do that and have another company do that for you. You can also set up the direct deposit. Of course, there is an extra fee for that one. And QuickBooks will help you do that. It basically ties in your real live checking account into your payroll, so that when you cut the checks, you don't even have to give printed checks anymore. You just give everybody a receipt and it automatically goes in. And usually it's like a day or two, pretty fast now. It used to be like a week. You can have an expert help you if you have very complicated things like different types of employees and maybe some contractors and you're not sure which is which. You can use that. And same here. The product support is basically the technical stuff in QuickBooks. So the first one, the expert payroll setup, is about laws and things, whereas the 24/7 expert product support is about how to use QuickBooks itself. So now you'll see we're only at $45 a month. And that's for, I think it's up to 12 employees. But we get a free month. So we're going to try now. So what's going to happen is we're going to go ahead and accept that so QuickBooks can do all that work for us. So I'm going to click on try now. Yeah. I don't know. I think your business is a different category. I mean, but like I'm retail miscellaneous, I think. Huh. Curious. Just run over there and take a look. That's a good question. That's sneaky. Well, not sneaky, but interesting. Oh yeah, it's gonna let me do that.
You have a miscellaneous.
Yeah, pretty sure. Let's see what I have. That would be my guess. Is there set up? Yeah, miscellaneous store retailers. Because you're lucky and I'm not. They're not charging you as much. I better not, just in case it messes up. Okay, so I'm going to get started. So again, it's going to go through an easy step navigator and basically ask some questions. So we'll just give them short answers, but you would, if you're starting a new company and they're just converting over to QuickBooks, that would be a little different than a brand new company starting from scratch with no employees. So have you paid employees in 2022? I'm going to say no. If you had, let's say you're using Peachtree and now they want to use QuickBooks, or they were using one of the big companies like ADT and said, you know what, we could save money if we do this in-house. We need to cut back some. Okay, so then you may already have a year's worth of information for the employees since, say, January. Remember, our tax year started in January. So January through October, that's a lot of months, 10 months. If you said that, yes, that's what you would be doing. Luckily, QuickBooks can let you import a year's worth of information if you have that from somewhere else. So we're going to click no, though. We're just going to start from scratch. It's going to ask, when's our next payday? We'll make it Friday the 21st. But it can be any day. It could be the end of the month and all that. We'll get into those settings later on, but we'll just make this a weekly one. So I'll click on the 21st and click next. Okay, now it's going to ask the work location. So I'm going to see if it's going to work. So I made up an address. It may or may not accept it. If it doesn't, it's we're at 640 M Street here. That is a real address. Let's see if it's going to work. Because if it doesn't accept the made up one, then you have to put in a real one.
Hello, Mr. Aaron.
Hello.
I have a company today. My son is with me.
Okay.
Can he stay here?
Yeah. He's not going to swing from the lights or anything, is he?
No, he's fine. He's my son.
Hello. It's thinking about it. It's not a real address. So what it does, it will look up addresses. And I think it might be causing trouble right now. So we're into payroll. So if you go into payroll, we're doing the setup. And I think I'm going to start it over again anyway, because I just messed it up. So on the left-hand side, when you click on payroll, I'm going to change this because I believe that's what's causing the problem. There it is. Yeah. So the reason it needs to have a real address is because it's going to search for the laws pertaining to your location. And again, California has some of the most stringent laws for payroll. So it's a good thing it's going to do that. And then I don't think there's anything in the county or city, but things like minimum wage. Some counties have a certain minimum wage higher than the state. And if that's the case, then you got to pay it, and QuickBooks will warn you if you're not. Yeah. Okay. Let's start. Put in 640 M Street. That is Del Porto High School's address.
So do we go straight to payroll?
Yeah, click on payroll and you should see a bunch of boxes.
Yeah.
And we only want the upper left-hand side one, the green one. Turn the others off just by clicking on it. Yeah. So see the one that says pay employees, you want that one.
How it's like?
Yeah, the other two, click on it. Click on it. See the price went down.
Okay.
And you're going to try now. So what we're doing is we're signing up for a free month of the payroll subscription. And what the payroll subscription includes is all the rules and laws pertaining to your business for employees. When you get to the payroll contact, it's going to extract the information that's already in the computer. If you put in a real email address here, just FYI, you'll get notices. So as we get to the end of the 30 days, it'll tell you, hey, it's coming to expire. Would you like to renew? You know, that kind of thing. It's up to you. I don't mind it. And then the other thing that happens, if there are updates, it'll remind you about the updates. Anytime though, if you use your real address, if it starts coming in, you can always at the bottom reply back stop, and it'll stop doing it. So this is the payroll contact information, and if you put in your info, that's where it's gonna send information. I don't know if they do any phone calls. I never got a phone call, but if you don't want it, put a fake number in.
Do we have pay employees? Yeah. Right?
Yeah. We've never paid employees before. Okay, you got that?
Yeah, we
So,
got that.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a no, yes, or no.
No employees, no.
No?
Next page is tomorrow, 21st.
So next.
Here is where you have to have a real address. If you want to use the,
For the taxes, I use mine.
you
Should I
can,
take
oh,
that or should I
it's up to you. They won't bill you or anything. It's just what it's going to do. It's going to use that to look up the rules. If you don't want to put that in there, just in case, you can put in 640 M Street. That's Del Porto in Patterson. Yeah.
640
640 M. Just the letter M.
straight.
Uh-huh. And when you type in Patterson, it should pop up and you just accept it. You used to be able to just make it up, but they've changed it. And I guess that makes sense in the real world. So this will be the person in charge. It doesn't have to be the owner. So if you've hired somebody to be your payroll person, you can put that person's name and contact in there. So if anything happens, they'll contact them. But for sole proprietors, it's basically you do everything. Okay, so then it bounced me out to the list. You'll see the setup tasks on the left. And if, okay, it might, so you're gonna say, I've never run payroll. Yeah, it might kick me out, so it's not gonna do that. And then there's another one I think it's gonna come up. Okay, go ahead and click done. Yeah. There you go. It should look, yeah, there we go, good.
Thank you.
Now, if I hadn't been kicked out, then it would have gone through what we're gonna do anyway. I mean, you can do it for the first employee, you can go ahead and use that little easy step interview, or just go out and add it like we're gonna do now.
For the, have you run payroll before?
No.
No? We're not adding any?
Not yet. I mean, we are, but not through that. So when you cancel, it should look like this. So here's some other steps. They're all optional. So, well, I guess this is, the first one's not. The first one is set up employees. And that's what you'll see here. Your company may need to have workers' compensation, and you can set that up. I will tell you, QuickBooks will try to sell you their version. So the problem with workers' comp is it's really hard to get a good deal. They're almost all the same. So it really doesn't matter where you get it from. If your company is large enough, you can have a 401k plan. Everybody familiar with a 401k? It's retirement. And a lot of times what companies will do is it's an incentive to get you to come work and stay. And they'll actually pay into a retirement fund for you. And then some will have matching funds, meaning you say, okay, I'll take $100 out of each of my check and put it into this 401k plan. Okay, so the company says, we'll match that 1 for 1. So if you put 100, we'll put 100, right? And they'll say, we'll cap it out at 500. They won't do more than 500. If you can, that's a really good deal because all this is pre-tax, meaning they're going to take it out of your paycheck before the taxes hit and put it in this plan. Then they're going to take that and put it in the stock market. And I know the stock markets look pretty bad right now. And you'll see people have lost a lot of their 401k value. So what'll normally happen if you take any 10 years of the stock market in the last like 100 years, you gain more than inflation. Because right now inflation is running pretty high, like 8%. So that means a year ago, you could have bought something for $1. Today it's going to cost you $1.08, right? Overall. And it's still going up. So that means you're just doing nothing. If you put money in the mattress under your bed, it's going to lose value. By the time you're ready to spend it when you retire, it'll be worth less than it would have been otherwise. So they call it a hedge against inflation. So you can invest it. And that's what a 401k plan is. It's a big investment plan. And investments usually go up higher. And there are different versions of investments. If you're into gold, you can do gold. Gold is safe. And the idea with gold is you physically own something, right? Something you could put in your pocket, technically. Or you can invest it into companies. And Then you decide how much risk are you into. If you're not going to use the money for a long time, you're not going to retire for 30 years, you can put in a high risk account. What'll happen with that is you'll lose a lot of money, but you'll gain a lot of money too. And you have to have a good broker. But overall, you'll be, when you're ready, then you change it from a high risk to like moderate risk or even low risk. And as you get closer to retirement, take out some of the risk. So you won't gain as much, but you won't lose as much. So it's all about your planning, and you have to figure all this out. So a large company or a good company with a good 401k will actually have a planner come and talk to people and say, what are your plans? Do you ever want to retire? Yes. What age? Okay, 65. Then what do you want to do? I just want to watch TV the rest of my life. Okay, that's easy. I can work on that one. Yeah. Or you say, I want to travel. Okay, so you're going to need a little more money. Here's what we need to do. And they give you options. You can buy government bonds. So treasury bonds. Everybody, when the stock market starts going down, people take their money out and they run into treasury bonds, because the United States government is not going to disappear. They're not, pack up and disappear overnight. They're going to be here. And that's what you're doing, is you're buying the government's debt. So whenever you hear about the deficit, that's how they're funding it, is people are saying, all right, I'll give you money because I know when I get it back, I'll get it with interest. But their interest doesn't pay as high as the stock market, but they are safer. So see the trade-offs? And if you really get into this, it'll worry you all night long. You're worried about your 401k, what's happening? When I told you I worked at Tri-Valley, when they shut down, it was like one of the worst times in the stock market. And a lot of employees who thought, okay, I'm going to get laid off, but I'm pretty good. I can take some of the money out, live on that. And all of a sudden it wasn't there. And they thought, yeah, that's not fair. Well, it's not, but it's the breaks. So yeah, that's the downside of it. And even now you see people on the news, they just lost a whole bunch of value. And it's not like somebody came to their house and took money away from them, right? It's money they never physically touched, but they thought they had in their account, but as they got lost. So you ever heard of Warren Buffett? Warren Buffett is a guy from Arkansas, and he makes a lot of money in the stock market. And he's kind of, old folksy Southern guy, just talks very plainly, but he buys different companies. And it's funny because while other people are saying, oh, the stock market's dropping like crazy, I want to get out and get my money out, he says, no, this is the time to buy because I can get some good deals. Then when it goes up, now I got all these holdings and they're worth a lot more because I got them early, or I got them when they're down. So he's got a fan club. He's got people who follow him. Every time he says something, if he says, I bought a soda today. I like Coca-Cola. Oh, Warren Buffett likes Coca-Cola. I better buy some, quick. And it's funny how he's like a rock star, and he's really old. He's, I think, in his 90s now. Yeah, but he's still doing it, and he's still beating the markets. So overall, just putting it in a 401k because your employer is matching it, it's really handy because that's money that you're not paying tax on. You don't pay any payroll tax yet. You only pay when you withdraw it, and then you have to pay what's called the capital gains tax. Whatever it went up, you do have to pay taxes on. So there's all kinds of things. Then, the same deal if you win the lottery, you got to figure out how to do that. Otherwise, what's the new lottery? It was like $500 million or something. Yeah, but they said if you take it in one lump sum, you only get 240 million or something, because everything else goes to state and federal taxes. But there are ways around it. So yeah, I can't tell you from experience, but what you do is let's see, as soon as you hear you won the lottery, don't jump up and down, sign your lottery ticket. So it's yours, because it's called a bearer bond, meaning whoever's holding it owns it. So if somebody comes along and grabs it from you, you could try to say, hey, that was mine. I'm going to take you to court. And the person will say, no, I never saw this person before. I bought this lottery ticket, or it was a gift or something, Yeah. Some people, when as soon as they buy them, they'll sign them. So they put their name on them, just in case you lose them or something and somebody finds one. Then at least there's some kind of documentation. So if you win the $500 million, they say go talk to like an attorney or a planner, because let's see, how does this work? When you receive it, remember I told you when we set up our companies, a company, an organization is like a person, that's what you would do with the lottery. You'd set up either a foundation or an organization, and then you pay yourself. So if the organization can be tax exempt, it will mean there's not as many taxes and you get to keep it all. The problem is you don't have access to it every day. You know, if I wanted to buy something for $500 million, I wanted to buy Twitter, I couldn't do it. Actually, Elon Musk couldn't do it either. He had to go out and get financing. So that's the way it works. It's tied up, but it means you'll have more in the long run. On the other hand, everybody wants to buy their friends' houses and cars, and so they want it all in one lump sum, and then they all blow it. I'm sure you've seen the shows where somebody had the money and blew it. It happens. But that's similar to like investments, where you would set it up and it's a corporation and you would be like the main shareholder of the corporation. But then as you take money out, you're only taxed on the money you take out. And then they put this lottery puts the money in for you. So now that you're planned for the lottery, you don't have to worry about any of this, right? Okay, I'm going to click on employees again over here on the left-hand side. So we could keep following those steps. And if your company doesn't have a 401k, you just kind of skip it. But they could add it later on. And now they have like small company 401ks, where small companies who couldn't afford it on their own join with other companies. And then now they can offer it, because when it comes time to get a job, and right now it's a very competitive market for employees, if you can offer benefits, health, medical, a 401k, sick leave, what's the other one? Vacation time, all those things will make the employer come, or the employee come to you. So somebody else. Did it work? Okay, so over here, click employee. There.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll see at the top, it says add your team, which was the next step in that little interview. So you could do it that way, but this is the way you'll see it more often. All right, let's add our first employee. So just like in our other screens, we have a new. We're going to click on here, add an employee. So her name is Ima. No middle initial, last name work. And then you could put in your employee's email address. The reason you'd want to do this is you'll see this below where it says employee self-setup. If this is turned on, you have to put an email in. And what that is QuickBooks will email that employee, hey, welcome to the company, set up your information here, and basically put in the same information you would do on a W-4 form through email. And it's a secure link, and you can do it that way. I'm going to turn that off because we're going to do it for her. And some companies like to do that because it's convenient, but at the same time, you got to make sure the employee gets around to it. And I don't know, when you start a new job, if you've noticed that you're pretty busy and stressed and everything, it's one more thing to remember. Having somebody at the company do it for you can be a lot easier. And then you make sure it gets done, because you can't get a paycheck unless this is done. So I'm going to turn off the employee self-setup and go to add employee. And it's going to come up here. Okay, so now we're ready to start adding information. So where it says personal info, I'm going to go here to edit. And we're going to add in her personal information. Again, if you didn't use that self-setup the first time, you can turn it on here. It's not too late. So if you change your mind, you could do it, but we're going to do it by ourselves. So we'll put in her birth date. It does require a birth date. To continue, I'll say January 10th, 1970, but you can make any date you want. And then for her address, I do believe this has to be real too. So I'm going to say 640 M Street, Patterson. So great, she works where she lives, at the high school. All right, next, Social Security number. So you have to have a Social Security number. It doesn't have to be real though, so I'm just going to put in a fake one. like that. So it's a 9-digit number. You'll notice it says, what if they only have an ITIN? ITINs are for people who are visiting the United States. It's a federal ID number, and it won't work for payroll. It has to be a social security number. The reason is it's the law, and they have to do social security withholdings. So you got to report those. And so some way or another, they need to get a social security number. So for a lot of people who come in and can't get one legally, there is a black market for social security numbers. And you can find it online, and you can actually kind of figure out how to make one up, and that's what they do. The problem is there is somebody behind that number. And when you start working under that number, it gets reported to the IRS, and then somebody else will get hit by it. And we had, so she worked for us in our job placement office. Her husband all of a sudden got this big tax bill and said, you haven't paid taxes for 10 years, and here's everything we've got. You owe us. And then he said, wait, that's not even where I live. Where'd that come from? And so he tried to figure it out. I figured out it was somebody using a social security number just so they can get paid. But of course, they never filed everything they were supposed to file. So he had to prove he was not somebody else. And then he said, well, just send me all the information you got. And they said, well, I'm sorry, sir, if it is somebody else, there's a privacy issue and I can't just send it to you. Like, but wait, he's saying he's me. And now you're saying, you know, it's not me. And because you know it's not me, you won't tell me the information because it's private. So anyway, it took him like a year to get it all straightened out. Luckily, they did, it was the IRS, so they know this is happening. They're not easy to work with, but they didn't like say, well, you got 10 minutes to pay or you're going to jail. Yeah. They work with them, and they get a lot of that now. So you just have to, one step at a time, untangle it. And he did. And luckily that worked out, but just kind of a pain, and then you're worried, and you don't need anything like that. So make sure they get a social security number. By the way, an employer who knowingly hires somebody who's not eligible to work in the United States is guilty of a crime. However, they aren't really prosecuted. So kind of employers know that. There is a website they set up to check, and every employer is supposed to do that. If you want to do everything perfectly, you do that. You go on the website, put in the person's information, and if it comes back okay, you're good to go. If not, they have to go take care of that. You'll see the genders here. You can put she's female. Oops, I missed. This part's not required, home phone number and all that. And I'll put one in anyway. The reason QuickBooks is asking for this is a lot of people, when they set up their payroll for their company, they'll also use this as the general contact information. So if they need to call her, like on the weekend, to ask her to come in early Monday, they'll use this to find her phone number. So it's more than one use. I'm going to click save. And there we go. All right, so the next thing is the tax withholdings. So click on edit on that. And now it's going to ask us, when did we hire Ima? So we're going to say 2020 or later. And the reason is the tax form changed. And so they want to get the right information. So this is basically information that comes off the W-4 form. So when a new employee starts, they get this form and they're supposed to fill it out. And everybody gets confused about, okay, am I a deduction? Who do I count and all that? So, but you do the best you can. I'm going to click here. You'll see you can always use QuickBooks to load up a W-4 form, print it, and give it to the employee. So you may have seen this before. So it basically says, what's your status as far as filing. So you could be single, you could be married, but filing separately, right? So those are the options. And basically asking, what dependents are there? And then there's all these instructions. Has anybody ever read all these instructions? This is the worksheet. And here's the breakdown. And all these pages, nobody ever reads them. It's basically, what can I do to get started, just to be done? So at this point, this is going to determine their filing status, and that will determine how much you as an employer have to take out. It's up to the employee to report this to you, right? So when there are life changes, like you get married, this needs to be updated. If you have a child, update it. If a child moves out, update it. So some companies will just say, you know what? Everybody, every January 1st of every year, we'll have a W-4 party or something. Everybody files a new one. Because for a lot of people, whatever happened, it's hard to remember that, oh yeah, you know, my life did change 6 months ago. And that's going to change my taxes, so I better update it. So some companies just say every year, everybody fill one out, don't care who you are, we'll have it on file. And that way, no confusions. Because if you miss it, it can be kind of expensive. So once you get that form back from the employee, you key it in here. So her filing status, she'll be single, married, or filing separately. So basically, as an individual, she's filing on her own. If she's claiming dependents, you can put in a deduction here. So we'll leave that blank. She can set up separate income if there's separate income in the family that she can add here. If you're doing it like she's an employee, but she's also a contractor for some things, you could do that. Generally, though, that's pretty rare. And then the other thing is you can ask for extra withholding out of your payroll. And I think I told you about my friend who thought that was a great idea. He loved that. I said, you know, you should, when it comes to April 15th, you shouldn't get back much. The more you get back, that means your W-4 is way off. And all you did was give a free loan to the government every month till now, April, when you get it back, because they don't pay you interest. You know, I said, better off, get it right, take the money and then put it into an account and you'll earn like 2% interest, but it's something. You know, and I think I told you, he said, nope, I know what's going to happen. If I get it, I'll spend it. If I know I have it, I can get to it, I'll spend it. By doing this, the government has it, I can't get to it till April 15th. And then when it comes in, I could buy something expensive because I got money to spend. And so, to each his own, but that's the way it works. If you put in extra withholdings, the employer is going to hold it out, basically pay it to the federal government. Then the federal government will turn around on April 15th when you file your taxes and say, here's your extra money with your regular money. And I know people get excited. Hey, I got $5,000 back. Okay, but that was a $5,000 loan you just gave the government. You could have had it, 12 months ago, 6 months ago, or whatever. And then same with the state. Usually, 99.9% of the time, the filing status is the same. It would be very, very rare to have somebody file one way for federal, another way for the state. But you'll see here, there are additional allowances and additional amounts to be withheld if you need to. And then down below, you've got the tax exemptions. In the United States, people have to pay these taxes, including Social Security, Medicare, federal unemployment insurance, state unemployment insurance. So that's what these are. Very rarely would somebody be exempt, meaning they wouldn't have to pay them. But if they are, you can mark check marks here. But at that point that you're about to put a check mark here, I would call some expert and say, here's my situation. Is it really exempt? Because it's very rare. But they might say, yeah, sure enough. Then you put them in there. By the way, if you, let's say they are exempt, but you don't put it here, what'll happen is it'll come out of their paycheck. And most people, they don't look at every little line and probably wouldn't even notice this until when they file their taxes, they'll just get a bigger chunk back and think they got lucky. So it's not like a bad thing if you don't put it in. If, however, you put it in and they are not eligible for it, then you start running into late fees, penalties, and interest because you didn't pay it. So I'm gonna click on save. She's not gonna be exempt from any of those. And see how we're kind of building this as we go. The next question is, how do you want to pay IMA? So you'll see this. payment method. I'm going to draw it very well, but I'm going to click on start this. And this is basically paper check or direct deposit. If you do direct deposit, then there's no check. You should give all your employees, though, a receipt to tell them, here's what was withheld, here's how much you earned, and here's the cumulative totals and everything else. So you still do that, still a piece of paper, but the transfer of funds occurs at the bank level. So we are going to do paper check. Good old paper checks. Later on, when we add more employees, you can have some employees doing paper checks and other employees doing direct deposit if you want it. Just because you do one way doesn't mean you have to do the others. Usually, though, employees like direct deposit. It's a little faster. And then sometimes when you go to your bank to deposit a paper check, they'll put a hold on the funds until at least like a day or sometimes a week. If it's a place that you've never deposited before because you're a new employee, and let's say it's big, like $2,000, and I've never deposited a $2,000 check in that account before, they might say it'll be on hold for 2 weeks before you can withdraw the funds. So yeah, that's no fun. Direct deposits, as soon as they get the notice, the money's there. It's electronic. All right, so we got her set up halfway. It's 6:52, we'll take a break. We'll come back at 7:02, we'll do her employment details. And that's when you get to decide how much you want to pay her. And I'll let you choose. And we'll see how generous you are. Run experiment. Because the air conditioner wasn't on when I came in, but it thinks it's on, so it might be a sensor. Because the doors are closed. Okay, we're back. So now we're going to finish setting up IMA. There we go. So the next thing we have to do is our employment details. So we're going to click Start. Just as with our customers and our vendors and even our products, you can mark her as active or inactive. She's going to be active, so it comes up automatically. But if she ever quits or we fire her, she can be terminated. She passes away, deceased. So you'll see all the choices. We have to pick her a hire date. Let's hire her on the 14th. So that's her official hire date. QuickBooks doesn't use this date to calculate the payroll, but it just does it for records. So like if somebody calls up and said, can I get a reference for IMA? You can say, yeah, let me see here. Oh yeah, she's worked for us since February or October 14th, 2022. Next, we have pay schedule. So I'm going to click on add the pay schedule because we don't have one yet. And here's where you determine how often you're going to pay her. So you can pay her weekly. You'll see there's monthly, twice a month, every month. There's you used to be able to set it up so you can even do it annually. I don't know anybody got paid annually. Well, you know, one whole check in 1 year. So usually it's going to be like every other week or twice a month. That's also called bi-monthly or semi-monthly. The difference is if you're doing it every other week, that's every 2 weeks, no matter how many months there are or how many weeks there are in a month. If you're doing it twice a month, that's like the 1st and the 15th, right? That makes a difference because like February, it's a short month. So the last check in February can be a lot smaller than say one with 31 days like March. And that way it varies. So it just kind of depends on how you want to do that. You can also do monthly, but we're going to do every week so we can do lots of checks for her. And you'll see the next payday is already set till tomorrow. So that's good. You could change that here if you needed to, but that just came over when we first set up QuickBooks. On the right-hand side, you're going to see examples to give you ideas of here is how the pay periods are going to look. So if we're paying her weekly, it's going to be once every week. And you can certainly do that. Employees like getting paid more often. There was even a move that once, because you're doing things electronically with the bank, why not pay them every day? You worked a day, get paid that day. There's nothing stopping it anymore because you don't have to write all these checks. Didn't go very far, but I'm sure it'll come up again. Somebody will say that's a good idea. And the next pay period ends today. Well, pardon me, we'll make it tomorrow. Right? And then you can call this anything you want. We'll just call it every Friday. So it came up that way automatically. But you can call it every Friday for subordinates or something like that. So you can call it any name you like. And then you can use this over and over again when you hire other people in the same level as IMA. And you want to treat it the same way, you select this pay schedule. And you'll see there is a default check mark here. Use this pay schedule for employees you add after this one. So it'll be the default one. And that's okay for now. If we are going to hire more IMAs. And we'll save. Down below, I think it's popped up automatically on mine. Here we go, hit save. I'm going to go back into the employment details again to make sure. See how the pay schedule says now every Friday for subordinates? Okay, so there's a work location. This can make a huge difference. So there was one company that I think it was like Lake Tahoe, and they had an office on the California side. And then just a few blocks down, there's Nevada, and they had an office there. If somebody worked in Nevada, they were under Nevada's laws. The minute they walked across the street and came over to California side, they were under California laws, and the laws are very different. So usually, they come up and say, okay, don't go across the street, you stay here, because it's too confusing. But a lot of people like to work on the Nevada side because Nevada has kind of friendlier sales tax or friendlier tax issues than California. You'll see too that I mentioned you can have different employment tax jurisdictions. Sports teams now, if they go to certain places like New York City, and they play in New York City, so like the World Series is coming up, right? So the Yankees always play in New York City. That's their home field. So anytime they play in New York City, they get taxed at a high rate. They have an extra city tax that they pay. Anybody that comes in to play them has to pay the same tax. Yeah, so they hate that. So there are arguments like, why is that fair? But that's why a lot of players in New York City like to go to other places, because then they don't have to pay the taxes for those. And what they do is they split up basically how much you paid. All right, here's how much you paid per game, and this is how much the tax would be for that. Please pay us. So that's one of those crazy things.
Is California higher than any other state?
California and New York are usually on every tax. Now, they're not really on every tax. I'm sure you can find them, but as a general rule, almost always. And that's why a lot of people are leaving both states right now, because why? You could buy this. You can get an apartment in San Francisco, or I can go to Wyoming and get a mansion. What should I do? Oh, that's a tough question, And so especially now, because so much work can be done remotely. Like if I'm doing this for you, I can do this here, or I could do it in Wyoming, or I could do it in San Francisco, or I could do it anywhere. So that's why they're saying, why am I tied to one state? And they move out of state and get the tax benefits of that. I think Nevada doesn't have any sales tax whatsoever. In Florida doesn't either. And a lot of their personal taxes are pretty low too, compared to us. But that's the way it goes. And they get mad because Californians move in and then they want to make it a new California. They want to vote for the same things. We need to raise taxes. And they're saying, like, wait, didn't you leave because of that? Why are you raising now? So anyway. So you can put her job title here. We'll see she's an assistant. And then there's an option to do employee ID. If your company has ID numbers for each employee, you can include that here. And sometimes they do. Like if you get a little name badge, it'll have their number on and you can list it here, but we're not going to do that. And you'll see there's workers' comp class. So this is the classification for workers' compensation. We'll go ahead and leave her blank. But depending on the type of work they're doing, they get charged differently for workers' compensation insurance. So for example, if she has to go up on top of the roof and run up a flag every day, then that might be a little riskier than if she's sitting in an office just typing on a computer. So workers' compensation charges more for the person who has to go outside than the person who's inside. And actually there is somebody who has a job like that in Washington, D.C. If you ever go see the Congress or the White House, there's a person on the roof, and you know what they're doing? They're taking a flag, hook it up, and they roll it up, and they look at it, and then they roll it down, and they take it off, and they put another one on, and they run it up, and they put it down. And those flags are then shipped out to constituents And you can say, this flag flew over the United States Capitol. 2 minutes, but it still flew over the United States Capitol. But everybody who hears it thinks, ooh, that's the flag, wow. You know, but that's, somebody's paid to do that all day long. And I got one for my son, just so I could say that. This is the flag that flew over the US Capitol. He's like, really? I said, yeah, here's a certificate. And, you know, it's about the same cost as a regular flag, but it wasn't for very long. It was just enough. But it's possible that the president saw it. You know, it's possible that a foreign leader came in and saw, oh, there's a flag. And they saw this very flag. It's in your hand, so it's a piece of history. Anyway, so that would be a job. You'd have a little higher workers' compensation because you're on the roof in the weather, running up the flags. I'm sure when the lightning comes, they don't send them out there. But that would be different than an office job. And so you put the classifications down here, so your company pays the correct workers' compensation. So if somebody gets hurt, they can apply for this, and then they get paid their salary while they're recuperating. So you want to make sure you get that one right. But we're just going to leave it blank for now. So there's all these rules.
It can be applied in any field, right?
Yeah, every field. If you're an employee, it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're an astronaut, especially in California, if you're taste tester for Gallo Winery, everybody's covered in the workers' comp insurance of some kind or another. So if you're at the employee status, if you're the boss, you don't have to be. If you're a sole proprietor, you're the owner, they're assuming you're kind of on your own. So if you get hurt, you're stuck. But every employee has to be classified and covered under this. And if they're not, then there's penalties to the employer. So, and then you have people who are trying to cheat it all the time. And it's a very difficult system. All right, next, pay types. I'm going to click start on the pay type. So see here, they could be paid hourly or salary or commission only. Hourly means for every hour they work, they get paid a certain amount, right? Salary means it doesn't matter how many hours they work, they get paid a certain amount like every month, like a monthly salary. And then commission only means no pay until you sell something. Usually it's sales commission, until you do something, and then you get paid based on what you do. For the most part, most employees are going to be hourly, but usually when you become a supervisor, it's salary. And I remember thinking, boy, I can't wait to become salary because, you know, I have to work 40 hours a week now. As salary, I could work 20 and I get paid the same. It's usually the opposite. Instead of working fewer hours, when you get to that level, you end up working more hours a week, but you don't get paid extra, no overtime. So yeah, that's the way it goes. So we'll make her hourly. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think in California, it can't be commission only anymore. So like even like wait staff, waiters and waitresses, no more just plain commission or tips. It has to be based on some kind of minimum salary. So here we go. How much do you want to pay her per hour? That's when everybody asks, what's minimum wage in California? What's the least I can pay? Does anybody know minimum wage for California? Yeah, you're right. $15 an hour. That's minimum. Federal, I think, is like $12.50. But whichever one's higher always overrules the other. So in California, you have to pay at least $15 an hour. So it just went up not too long ago. And what happens is some employer says, I can't afford 15, so we'll just have to do without and let somebody go. Then all the prices go up. All right, so you can do 15, or if you want, how generous are you? Maybe you'd like to do 25 an hour, right? Or you could start her at 15 and give her a raise later, and then she'll think that, wow, this is a great place. I got a raise, right? We, for our longer programs, we help people with job placement assistance, and we tell them always keep a resume with you because you never know. You're going to walk by a place, we'll say help wanted, and tell them here's my resume. So we had a student do that, and so they sat down, and this is before the minimum wage is 15. So she said, hey, I'm the owner. Yeah, if you got your resume, let's take a look at it. If you got time, let's do an interview. So they did, and it wasn't a formal interview, just chatted. She was the owner. And she said, yeah, I think I'm willing to try if you are. Can you start Monday? And she was like, yeah, great. She got really excited. She said, well, how much do you want per hour to start? And she's like, $10 an hour? And she said, okay. And then she came out, she says, oh, why did I say that? I said, because you were so excited, you didn't expect to get a job today, and all of a sudden you're on the spot. She says, can I go back and tell her I want more? I said, no, you kind of agreed, right? So, it wouldn't be a very good first impression. But I said, here's what you do. Go ahead and start at the 10. And then after a couple of weeks, do a great job, work really hard, ask her a lot of questions, be really engaged, make her think like, wow, this is a good person. Then say, now I've got a chance to see the job. Can we talk about maybe increasing my salary? And then see if it works that way. So that's the thing is you can, there's a negotiating tactic where you start high and let her work you down. So if you really wanted, say 17, ask for 20. And she says, oh, I can't do 20. I say, well, could you do 19? And then now, so you've already given something, you gave $1 an hour. So now they're kind of feeling like, well, you did come down, but no, I can't do that. Well, how about 18? Okay, I can do 18. So you only wanted 17, but now you got 18. So another circumstance, we had 4 students go and apply for the same law office. They all got jobs. One did have a little bit more experience, but they all got the same job at the same level. In our job placement office, we have the listings of the jobs, the names, and the pay rate. And one of the students came in and said, when you put my name on the board, could you not put my pay rate? I said, yeah, sure, it's no problem. Well, why don't you want it? She said, well, I got more than everybody else, and I feel bad. I said, how'd you get it? She said, I asked. The others were offered an amount. Again, so happy to have a job. Sure, I'll take it. And then in her case, though, she said, I've got some experience that I'm bringing here, and I think I'm worth a little more. Could you, do whatever? So she got more. And said she was embarrassed. I said, you should be proud. She said, I know, but I don't want the others to feel bad. I told her, but they didn't ask. You should be an example. Now they can go and ask. Maybe after like when they do their first employment review, ask for a raise because they're paying it. But anyway, so you decide. It doesn't have to be an even 15. You could do 15-15, 15-05, whatever. The only thing you do have to be careful about is when you set these, there should be some kind of thinking behind it, and you should be the same for everybody in the same position. Now, if somebody does come in with more experience and you're thinking about giving them more duties, like maybe they've been a supervisor before, then maybe you think, okay, well, I'll pay them a little more. And then when I can take a day off, they can be the supervisor. So you can even adjust the title like senior assistant or something. And that makes a little difference. Yes. Right. Yes, you can. Sometimes what they will do is ask you what you've been paid before, and they keep it open. And generally, we tell our students, be prepared when you go into an interview with a number that you want, the lowest number. I mean, if your lowest number is $17, that means if I offered you $16.99 an hour, you would say no. And if you would say yes to that, okay, so that's the lowest number, right? So keep working until you say, all right, here is my threshold. But in the job interview, you're never supposed to ask that. But be ready because the employer might, or the job interviewer might say, okay, well, salary-wise, what are you thinking? All right, you just open the door, now you run with it and be ready. So you don't get caught flat-footed like that one student. It's like, I'll take anything, So you got to be ready to negotiate. A lot of times, there is a theory that whoever offers the first number loses. I don't know if I believe that's true, but the idea is whatever the first number is going to be, whether it be by the employee, unless they're way under, or the employer, it's going to be negotiated. So if they say, well, we only want to do 15. Okay, then what's going to happen is if the employee accepts it, they lose. So it's just kind of your preference for negotiating. I always suggest normally after you do the interview, when you get the job offer, that's when they'll start talking about salary. And you don't have to say, if they say, oh, we want to offer you 19 an hour. You don't say, I've never been so insulted. How dare you think I'm worth only that? You don't have to do all that. I have to say, okay, I understand that. Can we do 22? Just ask it as a question. There are some places that cannot. They have certain rules, a lot of times like their union shop, that anybody coming in outside has to start at this level. They can work their way up, but they have to start here. And so they'll say, I'm sorry, we just can't. Or sometimes say, yeah, okay, we could do that. if they say that to me, I think, oh, I should have said 25. Why did I say 22? Maybe I could have gotten up even further, but that's the time to be ready for it. And then the other thing is, as you'll see here, there are other things. What you could say is, they say, no, I'm sorry, we can't. Say, oh, well, I notice there's a 30-day probation before the benefits kick in. Can we start that earlier? Something else to see if you can get a little more out of it. And sometimes employers will say, yeah, we can talk about that. We'll do that after, we get hired, we'll give it a discussion and we can talk about it after an evaluation. If that happens, make sure you follow up, because sometimes people will say that, kind of meaning it, but hopefully just getting through this and getting you hired, it's your responsibility to remind them, hey, it's been 30 days. Are you ready to sit down and chat? Another question?
Yeah, so I also have a question about being bilingual. They're not paying you to be bilingual. So are you allowed to say, I'm not gonna translate or speak Spanish?
You can. The problem is, when you say no to somebody, you have to be very diplomatic. And sometimes they'll have a job description, and then it'll be one job description for this rate, and then another position where it does say translating, probably gets paid more, and they might be salary. You can try to say, it's really not my job description, but it's hard to do that. And now it depends. If they do it once, okay. But if it becomes like every day, that's a good time. I'd see what I would do, start taking notes. I would do it. Take notes on Tuesday. I translated for an hour or whatever. Keep those notes, because that's your documentation. So then you turn around and say, I've been working here and I see my job has changed a lot. I think I could do a little more for you. Can we do it like an evaluation? And then in the evaluation, you pull out your list. So if you see here, here's the number of times I've been translating. Can we add that to my job and maybe add a little more salary to it? Okay.
In Yuma, where I live, the high school offers this certificate. No, it's like a seal when you graduate. They call the bilingual
Proficiency.
proficiency. So the kids apply for that. They have to do an interview, essay in Spanish, or the biography in English, and like a test. We have to do like it's a couple steps, and then at the end, you go to the interview. And my son got it. He's a senior right now in college, and he got it when he graduated.
Mhm.
So now every time he applies, he can just show that he's officially bilingual for any type of job that he's going to do.
Yeah. It used to be for jobs, they would list bilingual and that would be extra. But now it's kind of so assumed
Yes.
that it's not as different, unless you speak Hmong, because there aren't a lot of people who speak Hmong, and they're always looking for people to translate like Hmong to Spanish to English. So that's still in demand. But we had one student, she said, this job, I know I'd be great. This is a great job for me. The only thing is, it says bilingual and I don't know Spanish. You think I could learn Spanish before I started? I said, well, get started and see how far you go. And maybe, the interview, you could try it. I mean, even though it says Spanish required and then you don't speak Spanish, go in and see if they'll listen to you, because maybe they do have some wiggle room. Yeah. You tell them, I just signed up for a Spanish class. I'm working on it. Me gusta jugar football. So, they might say, okay, you know what? We'll do that. Okay, you sound like you're working on it, so you could try that. But generally not. It just, what's happened though is so many people now have easy ways to send out resumes. Employers are inundated by it. So if it says like brain surgeon, must have experience, people say, well, I've never done brain surgery, but I know I could figure it out. I'll just go ahead and send my resume. Well, that's fine until 200 other people have the same idea, and the person receiving them has to go through and take out the ones that don't fit. So it becomes a chore. So that's one of those things that if you are asked to work outside your job description, it depends on the situation and your employer. So I'll tell you one thing, when I worked for the county, I told you, we worked a little house. We were not in the main county building. County building, you ask somebody to do something out of your job description, they pull it out and tell you no. Say, nope, this is not my job description. And the union says I can't do. So absolutely not. So in that case, I got to be very careful about who they ask to do what. In a small, like if it's just you and me and I'm the boss, that's kind of harder to do. So it depends on the circumstances. But yeah, that was, I would never want to work in that office. Somebody had so one person would hum while she worked, and that bothered somebody else. So they've got a little partition to put between the desks. Everybody else said, well, why does she get a partition and I don't get a partition? I want a partition too. And so there was a whole partition controversy. You come in 5 minutes late, oh, they go to the supervisor. Well, if she gets to come 5 minutes late every day, that's, if you times 5, that's 25, that's half an hour. So can I get a half an hour off? Because it's got to be fair. And then the other thing they used to do is they all bring food for each other, and there was always donuts. So the other thing you do is, because you're sitting all day eating donuts, you're going to gain weight. That would not be a fun place to work, in my opinion. But when you work for the county, you get paid well. They have retirement plans, the works. So if you can stick it out for 30 years, you can end up pretty good in retirement. Okay, this option here is not required by QuickBooks, but you can basically tell it what's the typical work situation for this person. How many hours a day are they going to work, and how many days a week? If you do this, then QuickBooks will assume every week this is what she worked. If you need to change it, you can. So, she was absent for a couple hours, you can modify it, but we'll go ahead and put that in there and see how that works. So 8 hours a day, so she doesn't hit overtime, 5 days a week. If you don't put it in here, once you do it the first time for a first paycheck, QuickBooks will remember and carry it over every time until you change it. You'll see down here, you can set up a second type. So if she had another position, so like, let's say you did have a very rigid structure, and so she's going to work sometime in this position and sometime in that position. You can set this up here, and then when you're ready to pay her, you say how much she worked in this position, how much you worked in that position. Yeah. One of the other departments I worked in the county, we had to fill out, get this grid and say how much time we spent on the phone with clients, how much time we did writing contracts, and I got in trouble. I added my own box, time filling out time form, because it took me like 20 minutes. So, it's something I'm not doing something else. So I put that down there and I got called in. Why did you put this down here? Well, I'm trying to account for my time. Where am I supposed to put that? Well, we're not counting that. You're supposed to only do work. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was, I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. It's like, this does not work. Okay, so then there's additional pay types. So if she's going to get paid overtime, you can mark that here. You can also mark double overtime. So the way it works is she's allowed to work 8 hours a day. If you need to keep her for half an hour, that's going to be overtime. If it's a holiday, sometimes you offer double overtime. But there are state rules that people cannot be asked to work, if they're hourly, longer than 8 hours without paying them overtime. And when I worked hourly, we loved overtime. Double overtime was the best because you got paid twice your overtime rate. You can also see holiday pay and bonus and commissions. We're going to turn these off for now. You can always add them. And if she does work overtime, you can do that. Another place I worked, they said absolutely no overtime whatsoever because they're on a very tight budget and overtime would throw it off. If you have to stop what you're doing, if you're in the middle of writing your name, stop and do it tomorrow. And very strict. All right, now you can set up time off policies. So if you want to do this, you can. This time off is just paid time off. Basically, do whatever you want. So it's like fun time. You can offer that to employees. That's kind of a new thing. And what was really happening is employers got tired of being lied to. And in the morning, they get this message. Oh, I'm really sick. I can't come in today. And then, they go to the baseball game. They come back tan. And, oh, your sickness made you look really good. You're really tan. Yeah, so what they do is basically just say, you know what? There's your sick leave, there's your vacation leave, and then we'll give you an hour a week for whatever you want. And that way you can take it off. You just have to ask ahead of time so we can schedule it, right? Things like that. So we'll leave the paid time off blank. You can also set up unpaid time off. So this would be if they're going to take time off, but they're not going to get paid, and they're set for a certain number of hours, either per week, per month, or per year. So you can set limits to that, because some places will say that, if go take too much time off, even though it's not paid. We need you here. And if you can't be here, then we need to find somebody else. So that's why you set this up. Here is the sick pay. We'll add new sick pay though. So the questions you have to answer is, how is a sick pay accrued? Meaning, how do they earn their sick pay? And you'll see, you can do it by each pay period. You can set it up for every hour they work. Again, if she doesn't work 40 hours, bless you, she can earn a little bit less. You can set it up so that it all kicks in on the anniversary date, like after a year after she works. Then the next year, it just is there and she can use it anytime in that year. Or you can just say unlimited. We'll do it each pay period. Now you say, okay, how many hours per year are you going to allow her to take? Now, even though we have it set to each pay period, what it will do is take this number and divide it by 52, because there's 52 weeks and we said she's paid week. So it'll do that. So she'll earn a little bit each time and it will keep stacking up on her pay stub. So we'll say 24 hours per year. And then you've got maximum allowed. Here's what can happen. Some people will come into work sick and other people will never take vacations. So what'll happen is this will keep accruing. And if they work there for 10 years and they've never took a sick day, never took a vacation day, they have all of this built up. And when I worked at the county, it was the computer guy, the IT guy. He was there all the time. And when he retired, they owed him he got to retire 6 months early because they never made him take it. And they were supposed to, but I guess they just assumed he did. Nobody checked it. And so he just carried it over and built up. So they basically had to pay him 6 months for not working, and they didn't realize it. And they were stuck without a supervisor for 6 months. Oh, don't do that. So we'll put a maximum of 500. So that means over the years, if she gets to 499, she gets one more hour and then it stops. And then she has to either take it or you pay her, you can pay out for it or reset this number, but at least it'll give you a warning that she hasn't taken sick pay for some amount of time. And save. Once you do that, you'll see it's got a current balance. Of course, we haven't paid her anything yet, so it's 0. But now let's do vacation pay. So we'll do the same thing. We'll add a new vacation pay policy. We'll do it each pay period. We'll do 24 again with a maximum of 500. Oop, I said 5,000. So this is basically set up by your company. Again, there should be a company handbook that tells you, each employee, here's how much you can earn. And everybody should have it on an equal basis. Because if somebody gets too much vacation pay, that's not fair. Why'd you do it? Well, their job is more stressful. Okay, that makes sense. But if it's, I like them better, then you get in trouble. You'll see you could set up additional pay types. So there's reimbursements. Like I said before, if you did mileage, if they're driving for your company, you can reimburse their mileage here. If they get tips, you can set those up depending on how you do the tips. And again, each company does them differently. Like restaurants get a lot of tips. Sometimes what they will do is pool the tips because it's not really fair that all the wait staff who sees the customers gets all the money when the cooks did a lot too. So did you see that? There's a news article. A guy left, was that a $2,000 tip or something? And the person who got it, the waitress, wanted the whole money. And they said, no, we pool our tips. Well, she said, you never pooled your tips before. And so then it hit the news and he had to change his mind and say, oh no, she gets it all and undo that policy. So that's the problem. Once somebody gets money, everybody else wants it, right? But that's why you set it up early on in the company. You say, all right, we're going to deal with tips. Here's the tip rule. I found this out. I was joking at Costco because when I got my change back, she shortchanged me. And then she said, oh, wait, I owe you $5. I said, oh, that was a tip. And she laughed. And she said, we can't take tips. I said, really? So if I gave you $5, you really couldn't take it? She said, no, I got fired. They don't allow tips. I said, who knew? I never thought of that, but okay. So anyway, you have a lot of different options here. Bereavement pay is if you have somebody whose family member passed away, you can offer them time off for that. So lots of different options. And if that's not enough, you'll see there's other. You can actually define your own and define how much you want to give them. But we're just going to click save. So now she's set up with that. And then the bottom one is deductions and contributions. So here you go. The deduction and contributions include any extra withholdings or any extra additions you want to include. I'm just going to click add, but we're actually not going to do this. We'll go through them. So you can have certain deductions, and basically like health insurance. If the employee contributes to the health insurance, you can do a deduction from their paycheck to contribute to the health insurance. A lot of employers don't do that. They just say it's part of the package, but you can actually have them chip in. You can have additional retirement plans in addition to the 401k, and that's what they're here. And the idea is, if you're ever going to do these, try to get them pre-tax, meaning they run the numbers before they give you the check. If they figure out the check, then take the money out, see, then you've already paid taxes on that money. And then here's the other one. I just canceled that. Garnishments. So you'll see garnishment type. So if a legal authority has come along and sent you a letter as an employer and says, Dan needs to pay child support. He's not paying his child support, so we're filing against his employer. Then you can say, here you go, child support. And they actually do withholdings. They can also be garnishments if they didn't pay taxes and the federal government comes after them for the taxes of the state. It can be, your wages can be garnished. And it means basically it's deducted before you get paid as an employee. So yeah, that's why I always deal with those things early, because when it gets to this point, it's hard. And then the rule, I think this is still active. COVID changed everything. So I haven't checked this since COVID, but it used to be, if an employer had more than 2 garnishments that they had to deal with, you could let that employee go for that reason, saying it's too much paperwork. And it's unfortunate, because obviously the employee needs money. That's why they're working, but it is a big burden. The good news is QuickBooks will do a lot of this processing for you and actually generate the payments and send them out electronically to the right agencies. So that makes it a little bit easier, but it's still, it's still a hassle. And hopefully it never comes to that, but it does happen once in a while. So the other rules are, and I don't remember the breakdown, but let's say they had 2 spousal supports for 2 different people, 2 different kids of different spouses. So then they didn't pay their taxes because they were doing something else. So there's 3 garnishments, right? Each garnishment has a weight to it, meaning, let's say it's comes out to, for the first child, $50 a month. Okay. But the next child is also $50 a month. And then the federal one is $200 a month. If they're only making $400, well, there goes most of their check. They're not going to be able to live. So the rule is child support's the highest, and so it gets the higher percentage, unless there's another one, and it graduates based on how many there are, because you could have 10 child support payments or something. So the more children there are, the smaller that gets for each child. But if you have the federal gets a portion, so that makes these even smaller, but the federal can't outweigh the child support. See? So you can't pay more to the federal government than you owe in the total child support. So that's a lot of math, right? QuickBooks does all that, and it knows the percentages, and if this happens, and if there's a state garnishment, all these things, because they have different values, the computer figures that all out. So remember that $45 a month we were going to pay? That's why it's worth it. If you have to deal with all this stuff, that is a huge headache. And it used to be every year you get this big thick book with all the rules, and it's always in fine print. I guess because they didn't want to have too many pages, but it was really hard to read, and it told you everything, any possible circumstance, and boom, you'd have to figure it out and do it for each paycheck. So IMA doesn't have any of these, yay, and we'll cancel. So let's click done. All right. Okay, so while we're here, you see there's actions. If you ever need to change her status, like she got let go or she quit, you can do that. You can delete her as an employee. Once we start doing payroll, though, you don't want to delete her because we'll have actual transactions here. I'm going to click on the upper left-hand corner on employee list. And there she is. Okay. So we're going to run payroll, even though it's due tomorrow. So we're going to assume she's going to work 8 hours tomorrow and write her a check for assuming that amount. So you'll see here's where it did the math for us. We're paying her for 1 week. So we said she works 8 hours a day for 5 days. That's 40. There it is. Again, if I needed to, I could change it. Well, she took 2 hours off to go shopping or something. I could change that to 38, right? And when I tab over, all these numbers over here change. But not for our first check. First check, everything worked perfect. So we'll go back to 40. If you wanted to add sick pay and vacation pay here, you can. Otherwise, I'll let the computer do it. In the upper left-hand corner, I'm picking my advanced checking account as the account to pay for this. So that's going to give me my balance. If I had a list of workers, employees, I can turn off a couple if I had questions. I'm not ready to pay them yet by turning off and on those check marks there. So at $15 an hour for 40 hours, she's earned $600 gross. That's her gross pay. Now comes the fun part, the net pay. Oh, by the way, it does tell us always up here the pay period, so you can check the weeks, and the pay date, and you'll see it is for tomorrow. So it knows, don't use today's date. So I'm ready to go down here. If you wanted to quit, do something else for now, you could save for later, and it'll keep all this information in there. But we're going to preview payroll. And here you go. So you'll see now, remember she had 600? Yeah, not anymore. She's down to 498.33 because we're withholding 101.67. And again, if she didn't like it, she come back in and do another W-4. But you'll notice up here, look at the total payroll cost for her. That's because there's more than just her withholdings. There is the company match. The company has to pay in to taxes as well as employees. So I'm going to preview payroll details at the bottom here. Okay, so here you go. So the federal income tax, she's getting 38 withheld. Social Security, 37, Medicare 8, California 11, and state disability 6. But then you'll see over here on the right side, the employer contributions. As an employer, here's what you have to pay for your employee. This is why it's so expensive to have an employee. You're not just paying them your rate or their regular rate. You're paying the additional things for having that employee on their behalf. So there's additional money that comes out of your checking account to cover these. So that's the way it goes. And you'll see there's Medicare down here. And then there is a special one in California. It's there's California ET, now it's ETT, used to be ETP. It's the Employment Training Panel. It's a tax that the legislature put on all employers to pay a total of $7 a year to go into this fund to train other people. And it sounds like a good idea, right? They actually had 2 categories that could be trained, and our school used this program a few times. The first is new hires for people who are unemployed. they get training, they get a job. It's a really strict program. It's hard. The employee or the student has to finish the program. They have to get a job, keep that job for 90 days. And at that point, the school can get paid for their tuition. If any of that doesn't happen, if they quit on day 89, school gets nothing. That's one way. The other way is for companies that claim they're facing out-of-state competition, they can go and train their current employees. But what happened is that's the program that kind of took the whole thing over. And things like Virgin Airlines, DreamWorks, the movie company, like they need money. They applied for it. They got it. So it's one of those things that started off in one way and now it's kind of a different way. But the idea is trying to keep California competitive with other states. So not sure that that would be my preference for the money to go to, but they don't ask me. So that has to come out too. That's not a lot. I'm going to close that window. And we're ready to submit payroll. Again, if at any point you want to quit and say, before I submit it, I'm going to check something out, you can save it for later, but we'll submit. And then I get the survey. I ignore these. Just close them. But if you want, you can tell QuickBooks what you think. And then you'll get this little window. Payroll is done, but it'll ask us for a check number. So we haven't used check numbers yet. If it did, there would be an automatic default. So I'll just make one up. I'll say 1001. You'll also see this option to print the pay stubs. So if you wanted to, you can always print a copy of the pay stub. Sometimes employees will come back and ask you for that. And I'll click finish. And then, oh, there is this ad. Hey, not using direct deposit? We can help you with that. For a fee, of course. But we'll just finish payroll. Then it'll say, do you want us to help you pay your taxes? We'll do that later. All right, so we just paid IMA. Let's go and look at our checking account. So I'm going to go to the, oops, I missed. That's not what I meant to do. I'm going to go to my checking account. Those surveys, by the way, only pop up the first time you do this. So it's not that annoying. So I'm going to go to my chart of accounts, my advanced checking. And now you'll see, here's our paycheck, but it says split. And the reason it's split is the accounts are all kinds of accounts. So there's unemployment insurance and all that. So because it can't list them all here, it just says the word split. And when I click on it, I can go to edit and see the splits. And then you get the current and the year-to-date. Because it's her first check, they're the same. But as she gets more checks, this year-to-date will add up. Tell her how much she's earned over time and how much was taken out. And then the end of the year in January, you run the reports that go out in the mail and she can go do her taxes. So that's pretty straightforward. Now the fun begins. Now you start having employees who do have like a garnishment or something or other issues. When I worked at the county, there was a group of aides that they would work 9 months out of the year and then got summers off, so 3 months off. So the way they were paid was basically they were paid 12 months, but it was a division over time, over a year, of what they would have normally been paid by 9 months. So that way the checks were equal. Well, all of a sudden, they got a big bump. And one of them said she got a big bump. And she was the sister of one of my coworkers. And it was like $500. She thought, oh, I must have got a raise or something. So she spent it. And then next month got a call from the Human Resources Department, said, you know what, we made a mistake. We need that money back. And she said, no, that's not fair. You made the mistake. I should get to keep it. And they said, that's not the way it works. And they said, weren't you curious why you had 500 more? And she said, I just thought we got a raise or something. So I just spent it. They said, that's okay. We'll just take it out in portions over your next check so you can pay it off at no interest. And she was all mad, but that's the way it works. So if you ever have questions, ask. Now, to be fair, the way their system works, I could see her being confused. And then, like when I left the county, it was a closed shop, meaning I had to join the union. And then our union was the lowest union. But our union went first for negotiations when the teachers union came up too. So they couldn't get us anything. And they said, we're sorry, we can't get you anything. But we did get a Me Too clause, meaning if they do an increase to another union, they have to give us the same amount. And I'm like, great, how many groceries will that buy? It's not gonna be much. Well, so I left for another job. And then all of a sudden I got this check in the mail. It was from the county. And I called them up and said, hey, how come I got a paycheck? And they said, oh, you remember that Me Too clause? Well, the teachers union got like 10%. And so they had to retroactively pay you for the time that you were here under that contract. And so you got a raise. I said, oh, so they paid me for not working. Yep. Okay, thanks. Yeah. So that worked. So I had no idea that was coming. And I mean, they could have kept it and I would never have known. But there are things like that. So, I mean, I kind of understand where she was coming from, because she probably thought, oh, some union thing or, some negotiation thing, somehow we got a raise. But whenever you have a question, whether it's in your favor or not, call up and ask. Make sure you understand why. Because if they did make a mistake, that's the way it works, is there's probably something in the handbook or something you signed that said you'll fix it for them, and or you'll agree to work with them or whatever, and have to pay it back. All right, so there's Ima, our first employee. She'll be happy. She gets a paycheck tomorrow and spend it all on the weekend. So that's the difference between gross and net. And I have a theory. If you wanted your taxes lowered, there's one change we should do across the country. Instead of employers withholding it, make employees write their own checks to each of those agencies. I know it'd be a lot of work, but you watch how much people would then complain. It's like when you get your phone bill, there's all these little extra things and nobody bothers reading them all, whatever. And little ones, who's going to argue with 15 cents? Well, 15 cents over a long time could be a lot. And same here. So people be more aware of what they got. What do people see when they get their paycheck? Not the amount they could have had. This one. That's the one I'm worried about, because that's going to cover my gas bill and everything else. So, but they won't have that. That's why governments like to make employers or business owners do as much of their work as they can. That's why the employers do the withholdings. And that way the employee never feels like they've had it, now they're paying it out. And same with sales taxes. That's why they have the business owners collect the sales taxes, because that way everybody's not writing a 25-cent check to the government every time they buy something. So that is our system. We're going to add, I'm kind of out of time today. So Monday when we come in, we're going to add you as an employee, but you're going to be salary. And then we'll see how generous you are. Everybody was kind of stingy with Ima, but all of a sudden with themselves, hey, I deserve it. I'll give myself $100 an hour or whatever. And again, if your company can afford it, great. So that'll be Monday, but we've got our first paycheck in and she's good to go. Any questions on payroll and how that's all set up? Was it 4 years ago? About 4 years ago now, they changed the rules, and it was a stimulus, whatever I define stimulus. So they said, we're going to do is we want to stimulate the economy, and we're going to take that payroll withholdings and we're going to decrease them. So that way, not as much is held out, right? Then everybody saw an increase in their paychecks and they're all happy until April 15th rolls around. Well, remember, that wasn't extra money put in. That was just less money taken out. So what happened was April 15th came and they were used to $5,000 refunds. And now it's only $1,000. It's like, what happened to all my money? Oh, we paid it to you as a stimulus. And, that was one of those things that was different. And then they had, not too long ago, the stimulus checks went out. So that's taxable, and that got taxed. And unemployment insurance, people assume when they get unemployment insurance, well, I'm not working, so I don't pay taxes. Yes, you do, it's income. So the state and the federal will tax your unemployment insurance. So it's always good whenever you get unemployment insurance and they ask you to withhold. I know it's going to be things are going to be tight, but it really does pay to say yes, withhold federal, yes, withhold state, because otherwise, come the end of the year, you get this big tax hit. That's very painful. All right. So now we're a real company because we got employees, well, at least one. And if there's no questions, we are done for the night. By the way, you can always look at our net pay here. If she ever has any questions, it comes in. And as I said yesterday, you can get a job just doing this. This is still, even with all the computer doing all that work, there's still a lot that comes up with employees. But you got to have a good personality to do that. Because like I said yesterday, people, when they come into the human resources department, I've never heard anybody come in to say, you know what, you guys are doing a great job, and I just want to stop by and say, I appreciate all your work. Thank you. It's not that at all. It's my check's wrong. How can you do that? What? I need money now. I gotta get a bounce check fee Saturday if you don't fix this. It's always a crisis, and you have to have a calm personality and say, okay, I understand. I'm so sorry this is happening. Let's figure this out. Go ahead and have a seat. Let's look it up here. Oh, here it is. Yeah, if you're good at that, make a lot of money in human resources because there aren't too many people that can do that. Yeah.
I wouldn't, but she can.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you. You too. You're welcome. Thank you. You too. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.